Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. My name is Hal. I'm your host, going over shark attacks from the 1900s till present, mostly large sharks, and we'll get started. We're going to head over first to Bermuda. It's August 4th, 1961. Robert Sako, him and a dive buddy, they're out 2 miles from shore off Bermuda. They're dived down, they're about 15 feet down. They'd speared a fish and they're trying to recover the spear and the fish, a rock fish. And when they were returning to the surface, they didn't see the shark, but a blacktip shark comes up and bites Robert's right hand. So Robert still doesn't see the shark, feels pain, looks over and sees the shark, and he rips his hand away from the shark. So then shark goes away, he surfaces right with his buddy on the surface, and now the shark is coming back at him, straight at him. His buddy takes his spear and he stabs the shark in the nose. Now this is a blacktip shark. This is not a blacktip reef shark. This is a bigger, more dangerous shark than a blacktip reef shark. 6-7 feet, but still that's a dangerous size of a blacktip shark. It comes at him again, and he had buddy stabbed it in the nose when it came at him the first time, and the shark kind of turned sideways as if it was stunned, and then it quickly circled them, a tight circle, hunched its back and came straight at him again, going after Robert, mouth wide open the whole way, and gets stabbed in the nose again, and finally the shark heads off. They get into the dive boat. Robert's able to recover from his injuries, and luckily his buddy was there to stab that shark in the face. Shark didn't want anything to do with his buddy. Just wanted to get at Robert, just like everything. I would say it was because of blood. I think it's because it was wounded, not because of blood, because they leave blood scenes all the time. So, lucky encounter there that he was with a dive buddy, or he might have been in big trouble with that shark coming at him like that. That's our story of Robert Sako. Okay, now we're going to head over to Hollywood Beach, which is in Buzzards Bay, Mattapoisett. The date is July 25th, 1936. Joseph Troy Jr. is 16 years old. He and an older gentleman are taking a swim out to a sailboat that's offshore a little ways, and they get about 150 feet off the shore at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's about 15 feet deep water when suddenly, as the older gentleman, Mr. Stiles, is swimming with the quiet side stroke, Joseph is swimming with the crawl stroke, and it's noisy and he's doing splashing. Surfacing on the opposite side, so outside of the older gentleman, on the other side of Troy is a very large great white, and it turns onto its side and grabs onto the boy's leg and pulls him underwater. Stiles swims over to try to help him out. The attack had brought the shark closer into Stiles, but Joseph Troy, he fought the shark off himself and got up to the surface, and Stiles grabbed onto him and just took him to shore as fast as he could. I don't know what the shark's activity was after the attack, whether it stayed in the area or not, but it was pretty brave of Mr. Stiles to grab onto him and go in. He gets the boy in, but his leg is totally ravaged. It took all the thigh, almost to the femur, from the back and the lateral aspect of the thigh, ripped that all out, and they said it took about 15 pounds of meat, 15 pounds of tissue off of his thigh, all the way from his rear end all the way down to his knee on the lateral side and in the back. He had passed away from his wounds. They were too devastating, even though he was given help right away. Later on in the week, they were seeing one set of fishermen caught a large shark, had him on a hook. It dragged the boat a little ways before it snapped the line. And then a few other times nearby, within miles, people were being bothered by a very large shark. It chased spear fishermen and chased that boat. The boat that had snapped the line, it actually chased that boat, they said. So maybe a case of Jaws. Sounds like a sick shark to me that definitely needs to eat. If it is the same shark that was bothering everybody at that time, whatever meat it got off that boy, that's not nearly enough. These fish will eat, hundreds of pounds of food before they're even full. I mean, they probably can eat a good 600-800 pounds of food themselves. To have a blue shark, a 6-foot blue shark, an 8-foot dolphin, and a turtle in your stomach, that's got to be tons of food. I mean, a lot of pounds of food in there. So the sharks are probably 100 pounds. Dolphins probably well over 100 pounds. and then you add the sea turtle to that. So they're eating a couple 100 pounds of food at least. So 15 pounds wasn't going to do it for that shark, and if it was the same shark, I'm thinking that it needed to feed. It was unsuccessful when it was feeding, and now it probably doesn't have the energy to catch its normal prey. So that's our story of Joseph Troy Jr., 16, an attack, a fatality, and an attempt to predate. Okay, now we're going to head over to Fiji. The date is June 20th, 1932. Two Fiji girls, one of them's name's Asita, the other's Asana. They were out doing some diving for some fish. I don't know if they're just watching the fish or trying to get the fish. It doesn't say they were spearfishing. This is from H. David Baldrige. They were out in about 18 feet of deep water. They were at the bottom for a while looking under a rock for fish. Asana had surfaced. Asita comes up to the surface and she hears her friend screaming, and she looks over and she sees her in a pool of blood and a shark fin near her. Asita swims over and grabs Asana and starts swimming her into shore, but that shark is not going to quit. It attacks multiple times, keeps biting on her, and eventually, right when she gets her into the shallows, the shark is able to break Asana free now that she's so weak, and drags her off, and all that they have left is her hand and a piece of clothing, and that is it. The friend did everything she could to save her, but that shark wasn't going to give up. Didn't try to attack Asita. It just wanted Asana the whole way, just like the sharks mostly do. So that's going to go down as an attack and a predation for sure. We're going to finish off our unprovoked attacks over in Rio Haina Port, which is in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. This is sometime in 1961. There were 3 unidentified young men, young boys, it sounds like, probably around, young teens at the most, and they're swimming in the water, and suddenly the water becomes very violent. There's bad weather that it came in, and the waves smashed these boys up against a breakwater wall. Well, one of the boys are able to grab onto the top of the wall and pull themselves up when they get slammed against it. The other 2 didn't, and they got taken out further to sea. Once they're out there, witnesses that were there said that they saw 8 sharks arrive almost immediately. So 8 sharks are on these boys, and they went on the attack. A frenzy ensues. One of the boys is tossed up in the air, and while he's in the air, a second shark comes up and grabs him by the stomach and bites out his viscera. Both the boys are just decimated within a couple of minutes, and all that there is just a blood stain on the water for where 2 boys were sitting there swimming. Now it's just nothing but blood. You don't want to run into those feeding frenzies. They don't say how large the sharks are, but they got to be pretty big. To breach the water like that and bite somebody, I would think mako or great white or something like that. Bulls don't usually do it, and I don't see tigers doing it very much. So I would think it's one of those two, or maybe something else that is known for leaping out of the water like that when it's attacking. But those 2 sharks are very good at breaching when they're biting, and I'm not going to put it down the type of shark. We're going to put this down as 2 fatalities and 2 people consumed by 8 sharks. Okay, now before we finish out the show, I wanted to go over a couple of stats that I had seen. The first one is in H. David Baldrige's book with women, the 65 attacks in which they knew the depths of the attacks on women prior to 1968. It seems that 5 foot is the deepest the women were when they were attacked. So whereas the men go pretty deep and they would get attacked down there, women no further than 5 feet from the surface. So again, maybe another reason why you live longer, you take less risks than the men. So that one I wanted to go over. There's another one I wanted to go over from my stats. We're 180 attacks in on the stat sheet. I have to go back through with the new categories I put in, especially the ones to the far right, and go back through and comb through. I went through my memory just on the ones I was sure of, and now I got to go back through and find the ones that might have used a spear or stabbing somebody or anything for that. But what stands out is you divers out there, and I'm sure you experienced divers are well aware, but for new divers, people are going to get into diving, attacks at the surface are running 2 to 1 right now, just in the 180 attacks we've covered. So it looks like if you're on the surface, they might come up and test you out to see what you are, because when you're under the water, H. David Baldrige had seen a pattern that when you're submerged off of under the surface, the attacks might be less violent than when you're at the surface. Now, I know of plenty of violent attacks at the surface, so I'm going to have to pay attention to this myself. And I know plenty of them below the surface. Robert Bartle, the gentleman that you heard the thunderous roar when it was doing the death shake on him when I took him by. The guy that was crouched down on the bottom of the ground, on the seafloor, when he was bit in his face and his butt when it tried to basically fold him in half and close his mouth. So they are bad up on the surface and down below, but you know, when you're surfacing into the boat, going at angles so that you get close to the boat. When you're going off the boat to start the dive, make sure your equipment's already ready. So all you have to do is equalize your ears and adjust your equipment, get down below the surface, and then swim out to where you're at. And it looks like you'll be quite a bit safer in that way. You know, nothing's foolproof, but that'll cut down on your chances of being bit just by what I see in my stats. So we'll finish this off with land shark. We're going to go over to Taparoo Beach, which is off Adelaide, Australia. In February of 1972, a woman was being chased by a shark. I don't know how long the shark was chasing her, but it was chasing her enough that she was running up out of that water. So she was in the shallows, a 6-foot shark it is, and it chases her all the way. She runs all the way up onto the beach, and she just keeps going just like I would. You know, I'd get 2-3 states away and maybe slow down and take a break, grab something to drink. She ran off, and the shark ended up in the sand. It wasn't even in the wet part of the beach. It was in the sand. So it came all the way up, and probably a pretty big wave that brought it all the way up there, and the water receded, and the shark was stuck there. The shark was stuck there so long that the kid that was on the beach that saw it went and told the lifeguards. Lifeguards brought a hammer and dispatched the shark. So the 6-foot shark was the victim of his own attack. That's the second one we've had where they come right up out of the water onto the beach trying to bite people. The young boy, the mother saw something out of the corner of the eye as he was splashing. He was just walking along where the water is meeting the sand, and she was in the sand just a couple feet away, lifted him up, and that shark came up underneath where he was. So H. David Baldrige points out you're not exactly entirely safe when you're by the water. You want to be quite a bit away from the water to be safe. When I honeymooned, it was in Rockport, Maryland. I remember the water there. It had a weird look to it. You know, I'm used to this Keys water, which is light blue, but this seemed darker, kind of like a gray water. But it was 1999 when we honeymooned out there in September, and there was remnants of a hurricane and followed us home from there. So the waters might have looked like that because the hurricane was on its way in. But I stayed my distance from the water. I already knew about that one from when I was a kid reading H. David Baldrige, that it came right up underneath that woman's boy. So that's our story. That's our show for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back in a couple days for another show. But remember, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.